If you're dreaming of a road trip through the Canadian Rockies, the Icefields Parkway is one of those bucket list drives you'll never forget. Imagine turquoise lakes that literally glow in the sunlight, towering glaciers tumbling down mountainsides, roadside waterfalls, and maybe even a bear or Rocky Mountain sheep on the shoulder of the road. But here's the thing, this legendary drive deserves a little planning to make the most of it. Today, I'm sharing everything you need to know, the absolute must-see stops, how much time to budget, what to pack, safety tips, and even what it's like in winter. Before we dive in, I just want to say thank you for being a part of the Banff Travel Podcast community. If this episode helps you plan an amazing trip on the Icefields Parkway, I'd be so grateful if you could leave a quick review. It really helps other travelers find the show. And speaking of helping you plan, you'll find a downloadable PDF guide that lists every single stop I mentioned today, plus a whole bunch more with exact locations, timing tips, and what to expect. I'll have that ready for you to download in my full guide at travelbanffcanada.com/Icefields-Parkway. You'll also find a link to my custom map and a discount code for the Guide Along app, which I highly recommend for this drive. You'll also find a link to this in my show notes. Let's talk about the Icefields Parkway. What is it and what makes it so legendary? You know those Instagram reels that people caption, road trips that will change your life? Well, I can't promise that this drive is going to change your life, but the scenery will blow your mind. The Icefields Parkway, also known as Highway 93 North, connects Lake Louise in Banff National Park to Jasper, stretching just over 230 kilometers through some of the most spectacular mountain scenery on Earth. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it's often called one of the top scenic drives in the world. But here's what makes it special. This isn't just a drive with nice viewpoints. You're traveling through a UNESCO World Heritage Site where glaciers feed turquoise lakes, waterfalls cascade right beside the road, and the wildlife roams the same valleys they have for thousands of years. The road climbs over high mountain passes, winds through river valleys, and offers endless opportunities to pull over and explore. It really is one of those drives that you should do once in your life. So when is the best time to drive the Icefields Parkway? The Icefields Parkway is open year-round, but your experience will be completely different depending on when you go. For the full experience with all services open and hikes accessible, plan for mid-June through late September. All the lakes are thawed, the weather's most predictable, and you'll have the longest days to work with. Early season, May to early June, can be stunning with fewer crowds, but expect snow patches. Trails might still be icy, lakes might still be frozen, and some trails will even be closed for avalanche risk. In the fall, September into October offers beautiful autumn colors and crisp air, but shorter days mean you need to plan more carefully. You absolutely can still drive this road in the winter, but it will require a little more experience and some proper preparation. You'll need winter tires with that snowflake symbol or mud and snow all season tires from November 1st to April 1st. And you should always check road conditions before heading out. Check the road conditions and the weather forecast. You might even find that avalanche control work can cause temporary road closures. Even in the summer, mountain weather changes fast. I've seen it go from clear skies to snow in an hour, so always pack layers and be prepared for anything. Now, one question I hear often is, can you do the Icefields Parkway in a day, and how much time do you really need? Here's the thing. You can drive straight through in 3 hours from Lake Louise to Jasper, but that's honestly a waste of one of the world's greatest scenic drives. Most people plan for a full day, and that's the best plan. You're looking at 5 to 9 hours, including stops and short walks. But if you want to do serious hiking and join the Columbia Icefield Adventure, I really recommend splitting it over 2 days. We recently did a 3-day trip on the Parkway, and it still felt like we barely scratched the surface. If you're doing the popular Calgary to Banff to Jasper, back to Calgary circuit, you'll naturally get 2 chances to experience the Parkway, once in each direction, and that's perfect because you can hit different stops each time and not feel rushed. If you're doing it as a day trip from Canmore, Banff, or Lake Louise, that's still entirely possible. You just need to pick and choose your stops, especially if you're doing the Columbia Icefield Adventure. So how do you choose those stops? Which stops are the must-see stops? Let me give you my top picks, starting from the Lake Louise end. Bow Lake is one of your first major stops and absolutely worth it for at least 30 minutes. The turquoise water against those rugged peaks is incredible, and there's an easy walk to the shoreline with picnic tables. Fun fact, this is where the Bow River starts, the same river that flows through Banff and Calgary. Peyto Lake might be the most famous stop, and for good reason. From the viewpoint, the lake literally glows with that unreal turquoise color, and the shape looks like a wolf's head from above. It's just a short 600-meter paved walk from the parking lot, but just know that it is a little steep in spots. There's also an accessible parking lot at Peyto Lake, making getting to that viewpoint a little bit easier if you're mobility challenged. Pro tip, go early morning or late evening to avoid crowds, and if you can, visit the second panoramic viewpoint that is well worth it. Parker Ridge is the hike I recommend if you're only going to do one. It's a steady 2.7-kilometer climb that rewards you with one of the best glacier views in the Rockies. You'll be looking down at the Saskatchewan Glacier stretching from the Columbia Icefield. And then, of course, the Columbia Icefield area is your halfway point and deserves some serious time. You can walk the toe of the Athabasca Glacier Trail for free, or book the Columbia Icefield Adventure to actually ride onto the Athabasca Glacier in those massive Ice Explorer vehicles. The Skywalk, the glass platform hanging over the valley, is included with the Columbia Icefield Adventure package. If you want to get a little bit more adventurous while you're at the Columbia Icefield, you can always join an ice walk, which is a guided walk onto the glacier. Of course, Sunwapta and Athabasca Falls, which are past the Columbia Icefield, are both spectacular, easily accessible, and well worth your time. Athabasca Falls has multiple viewpoints, so walk all the paths to see the power from different angles. Now, you won't hit every stop in one day, and that's okay. Save some for your return trip. Those were my top stops, those must-see stops. But here are a few more stops that a lot of people miss, but I just love. Mistaya Canyon is only a 10-minute walk from the road, but it feels surprisingly wild. The river has carved these dramatic curves in the limestone, and you can watch the swirling water from the bridge. Beauty Creek to Stanley Falls is one of our hidden gems, and we just love it. It's like a quieter version of Johnston Canyon with a series of cascading waterfalls in a narrow slot canyon. I would budget about an hour for this one, and maybe even more if you're going to be taking a bunch of pictures. Another one we really love is Horseshoe Lake near Jasper. It has some stunning reflections in the calm water. It's shaped exactly like a horseshoe with a short loop trail around the shoreline. It's a great place for a paddleboard or even a nice walk. Now let's get into a few practical tips. Things that may make or break your day. Number 1, start early, like everything. This makes all the difference for parking, wildlife viewing, and photography. Of course, you want to fuel up before you go because your only gas station is at Saskatchewan River Crossing, and it's expensive. I always say bring lots of snacks, some food, and water. The services are extremely limited, and you don't want to be hangry when you're trying to enjoy the glacier views. Plus, you might just want to stop for lunch at one of the many scenic spots along the Icefields Parkway. Wildlife safety is crucial. Animals frequently cross the road, so stick to the speed limits and never approach them. If you see a bear jam where the cars all stop for a bear, use designated pullouts and always watch from your vehicle. As you probably know, you're going to need to download your maps before you go. Cell service is nearly non-existent once you leave Lake Louise and Jasper. And finally, my game changer tip, if there's one place to use the Guide Along app, it's the Icefields Parkway. This GPS-activated audio tour is the perfect driving companion. You'll learn things you'd never know otherwise and discover viewpoints you might have missed. You can use code TVLBANF for 15% discount, which I'll also include in the show notes. Another challenge that people often have is figuring out how to plan their day. Honestly, there's no wrong answer, but let me give you some real examples from our recent trips to help you plan your day. If you were going to do a classic day trip from Banff, you could leave Banff around 8:30 in the morning, hit Peyto Lake, Bow Lake, Waterfowl Lakes, Big Bend Viewpoint, and even hike the toe of the Athabasca Glacier and still make it back to Banff by 5 p.m. On another day, we have left at 10 a.m. and focus more on Peyto Lake, Mistaya Canyon, and the full Columbia Icefield Adventure. still getting all of those scenic views and a few other little viewpoints along the way, and home by 7 p.m. This works great when you want to include the glacier experience without feeling rushed. As a third example, you might want to do a multi-day deep dive. We did a 3-day trip. Day 1 was Herbert Lake, the 12-kilometer Helen Lake hike, plus all the viewpoints like Crowfoot Glacier, Bow Lake, Waterfowl Lake, Weeping Wall, ending with the Columbia Icefield Adventure. This took us from about 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. from Canmore. Now, we stayed at the Glacier View Lodge at the Columbia Icefield Center. So day 2, we were right there, and we started with Parker Ridge hike at 8:30 in the morning, then followed that up with Tangle Creek Falls, Sunwapta Falls, including the Lower Falls hike, and the Beauty Creek to Stanley Falls trail. Staying on the Icefields Parkway made for a wonderful evening where we didn't have to drive too far to get back to Canmore. Instead, we stayed at the Glacier View Lodge, waited for most of the day trippers to leave, and then hiked the toe of the Athabasca Glacier after dinner. Finally, day 3, we started with a Wilcox Pass hike, then did all the northern stops, including Athabasca Falls and Horseshoe Lake before arriving in Jasper. This really is one of those days where you just need to know your top spots that you want to stop at, budgeting 30 to 45 minutes for major lake stops, maybe 5, 10, 20 minutes for the viewpoints, and then 1 to 3 hours for hikes depending on the length. The Columbia Icefield Adventure takes about 3 hours total, and of course you want to add in some buffer time. Those mountain views have a way of making you linger longer than you had planned, plus you might need to wait for parking at some of the popular stops. Now let's review some of the top questions I get about the Icefields Parkway, as I know most people tend to have the same questions. Do I need a park pass? Yes, you need a park pass for both Banff and Jasper National Parks. There are kiosks as you enter the Icefields Parkway, so you can just stop and get a pass if you don't already have one. What time should I book my Columbia Icefield Adventure? Now, this really depends on your route, but here's my advice. If you're driving from Banff or Lake Louise, book it for 1 p.m. or later. That gives you time to hit Bow Lake, Peyto Lake in the morning, and then have a buffer for some traffic or extra stops. If you're starting from Jasper, 11 a.m. or noon works well. The adventure does take about 3 hours total, so factor that into your day, and of course book ahead as they do sell out in the summer. Which direction is better to drive the Icefields Parkway? Honestly, both ways are spectacular. Starting from Lake Louise gets you to Peyto Lake earlier before it gets too busy, and starting from Jasper gets you the waterfalls first, but the scenery is spectacular either way. What about bad weather? Well, even in July, you can see snow. So the weather changes fast. Dress in layers. See, I fit that into this podcast episode as well. And always have warm clothes in your car. If you have the option of doing this drive on a good weather day, I would recommend it. But I recognize that's not always easy to predict. And even a nice day can get dreary or vice versa. Where can I stay overnight? The Glacier View Lodge sits right across from the Athabasca Glacier, and waking up to that view is incredible. There's also the Crossing Resort, a Saskatchewan River crossing, which is, around a midpoint option. And then there are several hostels and seasonal campgrounds throughout the Icefields Parkway. What about the 2024 Jasper fire? Since the fire, the parkway is itself fully open. Now there's a couple of trails near Jasper, like the Valley of the Five Lakes, that are still closed, but all of the main parkway stops and hikes are accessible. Can I bring my drone? No, please don't. Recreational drones are not permitted in the national parks. Now, unfortunately, we still see people taking them out at Lake Louise, Moraine Lake. We recently saw someone along the Icefields Parkway with their drone, which we ask them to put away since they're not allowed, but please don't be like those people and just follow the rules. Drones are not allowed in Banff National Park or Jasper National Park. Is the Ice Explorer worth it? Well, it certainly is an adventure, and it's something different that you aren't going to see anywhere else. It really is that classic glacier bus experience, and if you're up for that and the skywalk, then absolutely go for it. If you want to get away from the people, you can also book the Ice Odyssey for smaller groups, or even do a guided hike onto the glacier for a more adventurous and eco-friendly option. What if I only have half a day? From Lake Louise, you can definitely make it up to Bow Lake, Peyto Lake, Mistaya Canyon, and maybe a few other viewpoints before you turn around. From Jasper, Sunwapta, and Athabasca Falls make for an easy half day. Now, to finish up, I'd just like to talk about a few common mistakes that you can avoid. One is don't try to see everything in half a day. You'll just stress yourself out and miss the magic of this place, which is really just enjoying the mountain scenery. Two, don't assume you're going to have cell service or that all services are open and you can easily find food or gas. Make sure you're well prepared before you head up there. Number three, don't forget to tell someone if you're planning on hiking and stick to your plans. Number four, have a flexible mindset. Maybe the weather's not going to be perfect at Peyto Lake, but it might be really enjoyable on one of the hikes. Or maybe one of the parking lots is full. You can just move on to the next stop and enjoy that one instead. Finally, you can get all of this information and more in my full guide, which I'll link to in the show notes. It will also have a place where you can get a full list of the stops, my custom map, and that guide along discount again. The Icefields Parkway isn't just a drive. It invites you to slow down, get out of the car, and feel small in the best way possible. Thanks so much for listening to the Banff Travel Podcast. If this episode helped you start planning your Icefields Parkway adventure, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could leave a review. It really helps other travelers discover the show. Don't forget to grab that downloadable PDF guide with all the stops I mentioned at travelbanffcanada.com/Icefields-Parkway. And if you have a question about the Parkway or anywhere else in the Canadian Rockies, send it my way at banfftravelplanning.com/podcast. Until next time, happy trip planning, and I'll see you out there on one of the world's most beautiful roads.